Michael Parkhurst adjusting his lid. He's wearing his Rhode Island gear. Actually, tell you what. Actually, it was right on the edge. It was right on the edge of the studio space, right there. There it is. There's your Rhode Island FC-ness that is hanging out with us. So you've got your Rhode Island FC stuff. I've got it here in the studio. I do want to ask before we go, as an owner, about the whole P/R discussion that was apparently tabled yesterday about the league that you're going into. We'll get into that a little later on. You can put your owner hat on. You can take that hat off, put your owner hat on. We'll talk about that. So how was breakfast ball?
Breakfast ball. It was a struggle. It was a grind, John. First experience playing in a tournament, and it showed.
Please elaborate, sir, since we've opened this door.
No, to be fair, the first day I didn't play terrible. I played. I just played average, so I didn't play great, but I didn't play terrible. So he's talking about the member tournament that I played in, golf.
Yes.
Which they didn't allow breakfast balls, and I could have used a handful.
Yes, it's the equivalent of like an early morning mulligan, Jason. Where instead of calling it a mulligan because you're in an early morning tournament, it's a breakfast ball. And so, those of us here on the show, we'd sit there and it's like, look, you guys ought to get all the breakfast balls you want just because you're dropping right into a golf course. You're playing an early morning tournament. You're not awake unless you got up at the crack of before dawn 30. So I think that there ought to be some allowances made for more than one breakfast ball per nine. That's just me.
I agree.
Am I wrong? I didn't think I was wrong.
No.
How much Women's World Cup have you been able to either watch in replay or look through social media and things like that?
A good amount. Watched the first two games of the U.S. fully, but caught a decent amount of the other games just through social media and catching bits and clips here and there.
So what have you thought?
From the U.S. perspective, a mixed bag.
Yeah.
I think that, if you're looking at it optimistically, we haven't played our best and we got through the group. So that's great. Because it's difficult to get through the group. I mean, ask Brazil, Canada,
Germany. Yeah.
If they'd be happy to be where the U.S. is right now. No doubt the road's tougher now. I mean, Sweden matchup's difficult. The next round, if we were able to get by Sweden, you've got Japan and Norway, the winner of that. So it's a tough road ahead. But hey, their goal is to win it, right? Because they're good enough to win it, and they've done it obviously 2 times in a row now, and a handful of times. So if they're going to do it, they have to beat the best anyway. So it doesn't matter at what point, but you're just hoping that, things start to click. Offensively, it's been a struggle. Even in the first game where we're creating chances and, against a far, inferior team, it just didn't look sharp in the final third, and that's carried over a bit. And so hopefully we can turn it around. But, I think that, in my personal opinion, I thought that the criticism of the women for their dancing and signing autographs and stuff, I thought it was a little bit too far. Because again, I think that you need to be excited that you get out of the group. And I think that they know that they didn't play well. I think they know they got lucky, right? They're not blind to those things. But I am hoping that, that supreme confidence and teetering on the edge of cockiness helps them have that swagger in the knockout rounds.
And I think it also speaks to the growth of the game in and of itself, where you've got, and we were talking about it with the guest that was on before you, where you've got 3 teams from the African continent that have made it to the knockouts. You've got a team in Jamaica that has a 17-year-old rising senior from Chamblee High School that is playing minutes in the second half and being the fresh legs alternative for them in Soleil, Washington. How the game in and of itself is growing and the margins are shrinking to where if you had a team that was going to out athletic, to create a word, the team that they were going up against. They can't quite do that anymore. If you're talking about a big gun, you can't just out athletic teams anymore because those margins are closing.
Totally. And I think the U.S. are realizing that, because we used to just out athletic other countries. And we can't do that as much anymore. And it's great for the game. It's great that women are getting these opportunities, and the game is growing, and that these other nations are catching up and closing the gap. It's great for the game, but definitely it's something for U.S. soccer to keep an eye on. Of, hey, what do we have to do to make sure that we stay atop this mountain?
How much mentoring is, I mean, and if you can think of percentages off the top of your head, how much of the mentoring that you and Greg and Beyond Goals do is male athlete, female athlete? How what's the dividing line? How much is how many? I guess what's the female athlete perspective with the male athletes?
I'd say it's 20 to 25, 75, 80.
Okay, so 3 to 1, 4 to 1, something like that.
Yeah.
Is there anything that's different in the conversations with male mentees and female mentees, or is the messaging pretty much the same? Do you have to do things differently with one set or the other?
No, I think the messaging is pretty much the same. I think the only difference is I try and include clips of women's national team games rather than clips of men doing stuff, because I think that's important. But other than that, though, I think it's really quite the same. A lot of these young women out there, they're pushing themselves, and they want to get to that highest mountain. Some of the things that are different is the leagues, and college is still atop the mountain. I know that there's now a few players that are skipping college and turning pro, but that's very, very young and very new for women. So I still think the conversation is, ECNL to college for the very top athletes. So that conversation is just a little bit different as far as pathways, but everything else is kind of gender neutral.
When you are having conversations with your mentees, this is just a question that has struck me for a while. Is there a question or a topic that you wish they would address with you more that you don't? Is there a question that you wish you would get asked that you never asked? Is there a situation that you wish you could address more, but they never bring up, and then you've kind of maybe forget to bring it up or something like that? Is there something that you wish you were asked that you never get the chance to answer?
That's a good question.
Is there a part of the mentoring aspect of it that it's like you might only be able to gloss, and then you wish you could get more in depth, but for whatever reason it kind of gets put to the side, then you forget about it and it kind of goes off in the corner and gathers dust? Is there anything like that happens? Is there a topic or an angle that never really gets the sunlight that it deserves, I guess is probably the way to phrase it?
I think that one topic is parent involvement. I wish that I could be a little bit more upfront with some things. But as far as with the players, I think that leadership wise, if they would ask more questions about, and I got one just yesterday from a mentee asking about, the team vibe is not good, and I seem to be accepting losing, and some guys don't care. And how do you change that environment? What are different ways to try and go about, changing the mentality within the group? Things like that are really, really good questions, and they're difficult, and it's challenging. And even for me, as a player back in the day, that's one thing I didn't do very well, was hold guys accountable. Guys like Joseph and Jeff were far better than I was at holding guys accountable. But I think interactions with teammates and how to deal with, the teammate that you don't see eye to eye with, the teammate that you wish cared more or did things differently or goofs off too much, right? How to, instead of just shutting them off or ignoring them, right? How do you get to them? How do you get them on the same page? How do you, still get the best out of them? Those types of things I think are important that we kind of just forget about or don't deal with.
So then how do you address, someone who comes up with you and it's like, hey, I want to try to change a team vibe. And it's that one person that is banging their head up against a majority of players or something like that. Because if that majority has that vibe of, schlep rock or droopy dog or whatever, the black cloud, and that one player wants to come in and address it and try to change it, obviously it's a massive battle, but I think it speaks to that mentee about wanting to change it in the first place. What are those conversations like about changing a vibe?
It's difficult and it's not overnight, for sure. And, it depends on your role within the team a little bit, because, if you're a leader or a respected player on the team, then you have a little bit more influence to change things. If you're a role player or just, a good player, but not a leader per se on the team yet, then I think that you have to go about it maybe a little bit differently. But I think it starts in training, where it's important that every possession game and every small-sided game, people care about winning those games, because I think it slowly starts to translate over of like, okay, losing is not acceptable. We need to win. We need to have that hunger to win. And I think that a lot of those games and training, that's where that is established. So that when you go out there on a game day, you've got that same intensity and fire to win a small-sided game now with your teammates in 11-a-side. So I think that's the first step.
Have you gotten better about reminding folks? You mentioned about holding folks accountable, and something that you got to learn at, hanging out with Jeff or Joseph and in that environment. Have you gotten better about reminding folks and being accountable about those kinds of things? Have now that you've had time to kind of look at it and now be a mentor about it, have you been better about reminding folks about accountability?
Yeah, and in my opinion, it's one of the most difficult things to do, is hold people accountable, because for the most part, you want to be friends with teammates, and you want to be viewed like that, and to hold people accountable is to stick your neck out there a little bit and be uncomfortable in the situation, and that's hard for some people, and it takes a certain personality to not care a little bit. But the conversations are around that, if that's not in you, you have to know that if you feel it, the majority of the team feels it. And so by you holding someone else accountable, half the locker room, most of the locker room are even if they're quiet, they probably support you and appreciate that someone is holding somebody accountable.
Well,
and I think that.
Well, and just because you mentioned that, and I think that voices come across in different ways. You can either be that vocal leader and have that voice that's out there, or be the quiet guy that comes across and it's just like you know how to pull somebody aside. It's just like you want to have that private conversation, or you want to have that look or the stare or something. I think that comes that can come from a couple of different angles. Yeah,
totally. And I was definitely more of a side conversation, and I think that helped me a little bit as far as like when I did blow up in a locker room or get really frustrated. I think everyone listened and kind of, it took the room by surprise, sort of, and kind of make them all kind of think of like, oh, something really must be up if Parky's acting like this, right? It's different if it's somebody that's constantly blowing up and constantly yelling, right? And then it's just kind of, oh, it's just this guy going off again. But if it's out of the ordinary, it kind of sticks out a little bit more.
When it comes to blowing your stack, I mean, what kind of an event did it take for you to blow your stack to where you're bringing the hair dryer out, and then that locker room is sitting there going, "Oh, ish, Parky's really mad." I mean, you don't have to necessarily say specifically what it was, but what was the event that led up to it and got you to that point to where you just had to sit there and blow your stack?
Yeah, not too often, but it would be more cases of like if I saw things within the team, little quarrels that were affecting the performance on the field that are costing all of us more running, more effort, more losses, things like that, especially at either at halftime or right after the game. Very, very rarely at training for me. Moments like that, and just the disrespect or just a lack of effort or a lack of care, it just wasn't acceptable. And every now and then, it just boils over, right? If you feel like you're giving everything you got, and you have some teammates that you don't feel like aren't, that's really frustrating, especially this time of season when it's 90, 100 degrees out, and you think somebody else isn't working too hard for the team, and it's costing everybody else, and you lose, or you give up a goal because of it or something like that. That's when you can blow up pretty quickly.
No doubt. I mean, so then let me get to Jason's question, and I know that you have it. You can keep an eye on the timeline too. Nick's wants to know if you think that Gonzalo Pineda is holding the Atlanta United guys accountable, and do you see that from him and this team?
Yeah, it's tough for me to say without being there, because I think that a lot of it can be done in the film room. There's certain coaches like Tata we didn't hold guys accountable in that regard with film, right? When we came off a bad game or a game where somebody had a couple mistakes, or even multiple people had mistakes that led to us losing, he didn't like to show the group that. He didn't like to call guys out like that. And I understand that a little bit, because what's in the past is in the past, and you kind of want to look forward and keep guys' confidence. But at the same time, I think it's an important learning tool, but also to let them know, like, hey, nothing goes unnoticed, right? Every play is important within a game. And, I think that the rest of the team, for the most part, right, if it's like, I'll use the last game as an example, right? It's a terrible mistake from Hernandez to go for that header, right? It's Miles's ball. You let Miles go for that. You stay with your guy on the wing, right? Terrible mistake. And I think that something like that, like guys, it's not a lack of effort or anything like that. It's a quick little mental mistake. And I think that, if you're watching that on video, the next day or something, like, guys in the locker room aren't mad at Ronald anymore, right? It's like, it's in the past, but let's learn from it as a group, right? So that the next time it happens on the other side of the field, Wiley doesn't make that mistake, or Lennon or whoever, right, is in that position. Let's not compound mistakes here. And so, I think that I'm assuming he's trying to keep guys accountable. I mean, Parata's not in the lineup right now, and Abrams having a chance. Things are mixing up a little bit. I think that I want to think that he's doing the best he can to keep guys accountable.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating, of course, when these little mistakes are costing points.
So when it comes to your mentees and reminding them to keep the past in the past, not dwell on it, those kinds of things, so they can focus on improving and going forward, how do they take those kinds of conversations and those kinds of hints? Because I would imagine, professional athletes, they understand that they can put things in file 13, wad it up, throw in the garbage. Okay, I learn from it, I move on. Are those conversations with mentees, do they have to be a little bit more constant? Do they have to be reminded about these kinds of things? Because I would imagine that, because when we were teenagers, when something happens, we really take it personally. And it bogs us down, and it takes a lot to kind of push through it. When you have conversations with mentees, is it still the same with that generation as it was with mine and with yours?
Well, that's a lot of our conversations, and because I think what you're talking about is a growth mindset, right?
Yeah.
And accepting that things aren't perfect, nor should they be. But what do you do with these moments that aren't good, right? You forget about them, or you can learn from them. And if you learn from them, then there is no such thing as failure, right? It's just a learning tool. So that is a key component of our mentoring, and it's a mentality that some players have innately, and some players definitely need to work on, and it's a struggle for them. But that doesn't mean it can't be overcome and it can't be learned, right? And some of that is like focusing on the positives, even though you're making mistakes. So, right, you focus on the positives, and then you think about that one mistake and how do you learn from that and overcome it, right? And it's just more so like not taking it personal, right? Everyone makes these mistakes, and I think some of it comes down to expectations as well, of like, hey, stop expecting to play perfect or having a desire to play perfect. I saw something recently with Pep Guardiola. I think it was an old clip of him in a training session with Man City, and he got really upset with somebody, I forget who, because they weren't taking risks. And right, that's a great way to look at things, right? Where it's like, hey, you want to take risks, and the more risks you take, the more mistakes you're probably going to make. And especially in training, you want to be doing that. And even in games, especially in certain parts of the fields, you need to take the risks, because that's when good things happen. That's when key passes and goals, those things come usually from risk taking. So if you're playing a perfect game, then you're not challenging yourself enough.
Like when a particular player sees a back pass, and it's a Portland player, and he jumps the passing lane, and he creates a turnover that turns into a goal in a championship game situation, like that kind of a risk. See, nod the head. See, there you go. That's why I was looking for that. I was looking for that. You mentioned leadership. When it comes to mentees these days, how many of the mentees, or I guess if you want to talk about it from a group perspective, how many of your mentees are those innate leaders that you talk about, and how many of them are learning to become leaders as you and Greg get to spend more time with them?
I think probably 60-40 are leaders, or have the viewpoint that they can be viewed as a leader or have some leadership qualities within their team. I think that, and that's impressive. I like that. And I think that, one of the things we stress is you don't have to be the captain. You don't have to be the leader, or, who coach thinks is the leader, in order to have some leadership qualities and bring some leadership to the team, right? We had a lot of leadership within Atlanta United, even though Jeff or I was wearing the captain's armband. Brad was a leader, Darlington was a leader, Joseph was a leader, Miggy was a leader. Like, these guys all had some leadership qualities that they brought to the team that guys respected, and understanding what those qualities can be for you as a person is key.
When you are in these kinds of situations, what's it like for you to see someone grow into a leader? That individual that didn't come in, and they might have had some of those instincts, but to see them finally grow and flourish as they're growing into a leader. What's it like for you and Greg to see that kind of individual come out and basically blossom as they continue to learn?
Yeah, I think it's awesome. That's why we do what we do, is to see that growth, for sure. And it's awesome to see when it's clicking and they're understanding it and it's helping them, and they feel good, and they're excited to go to practice, and they're excited to write in their journal afterwards and share some of the good things that they've done, and explain how they're implementing some of the things and what they're doing for their team, and just understanding their role, right? I think that you can find great pleasure in in understanding your role within a team, whether you're in sport or outside of sport, right? You don't have to be the head honcho to have a really big impact and enjoy what you do, as long as you know how important yourself is to that team.
Rapid fire before we go, since we got 5 good minutes. Emilio's asking, can a player come across as possibly overly vocal to the point that other players may tune him out?
Yes, if it's overly vocal to the negative side. If a guy is constantly, complaining about this, complaining about that, on guys about bad passes and technical things that they're messing up, then yes, guys will tune it out and won't care as much when they're saying things. You can't be too much to the positive, though.
Yeah. Abby, with an FYI, the East Valley new building isn't open until after the fall break, and she's hoping that the family as well.
Delays.
Sound like Martin the Martian all of a sudden. Delays. Ricky Ricardo, do you have any restaurant suggestions in Providence? Because Ricky is listening to the show, and he's on his way down there right now.
Oh, wow. Vonda is not technically in Providence, but it's the best little Italian place, Vanda. It's amazing. What else in Providence? Federal. You can't go wrong on Federal Hill.
Okay. All right. Federal Hill. We'll keep an eye on that. Also, are there any stores that have RIFC merch, or does he just get it online?
We have a store at our facility in Pawtucket. I should know the address, but I don't off the top of my head. But it's right in down. I mean, Pawtucket's not big. Downtown Pawtucket's not big. So our headquarters has got a storefront right outside of it. So if you're in Pawtucket, you probably can't miss it.
Okay. What do you think about this Messi dude? And it seems like Barcelona from the late 2010s that have shown up down there in Fort Lauderdale.
It's incredible. It really is. I mean, he seems to be bought in. He's obviously playing well. Him and Joseph have got a good connection. They're going to score a ton of goals. Busquets is incredible as well. And there's going to be no shortage of players who are going to be asking their agent this offseason, can I get to Miami? And they'll take less money.
Yeah.
Because to play with him and Busquets and what's going on down there, and Joseph, and I mean, for sure. So, and with that comes probably a lot of pressure on Tata and the group to win MLS Cup next year. I mean, this year you've got to pass because of where they are.
You've also got Open Cup and Leagues Cup, which can get you into CONCACAF Champions League, which is another entry point for the pink team.
Yeah, which is important. So we'll see. I obviously he's not going to keep up the rate that he's on right now. I mean, I don't think, but he's had all home games right now. So let's see how he does when he gets on a plane and gets into Dallas and it's 110 degrees.
Exactly. So
not that it's cool in Miami either, but
you just have weather delays in Fort Lauderdale. Cut the promo for me about everything going on with you and Greg and Beyond Goals.
We're getting into the thick of it. Preseason starting up. We've got a preseason package going on. So giving a discount to kids that are trying to get into it and on the fence about it. And so excited about that. I'll be down there at the end of the month for Atlanta United Academy, kickoff dinner with Arthur at the Benz they do every year. So Greg and I will be part of that. We're excited to be there for that. So that's about it.
And owners meetings in Colorado Springs that were supposed to be starting in the early part of next week for USL Championship, where things were supposed to be on the discussion, but Jeff Ruder says now they're not. So the P/R discussion gets tabled for another time. Enjoy the owners meetings. We'll catch up with you soon, my friend.
Appreciate you, John.
All right, that's Michael Parkhurst. You might have heard of him. He's a good dude.